That would have been in about 1980. Yeah, so there was no such thing as matter management back then. Didn't exist. One of the people at that company started up his own company, and he decided to deal with law firms. And he recruited me to go work there. And at that time, I had no experience with law firms. Had a little disc in it that they would go to that machine to do all the research versus the way we do it today on our cell phones. Yeah, they used to use paper, and they still, at that time, still used paper. In fact, attorneys didn't use computers. But it was very crude. It didn't, I mean, the original didn't even have a disk drive in it. Or two floppies.
I have one of those.
Right? Yeah. Browser-based applications, all of that kind of stuff. It was not something that the legal profession readily adopted. They were scared of it. They really didn't want to have anything to do with it. Started it.
Okay.
So what do you want me to introduce myself as?
You can.
I'm terrible at introducing myself. I'm Bernardo. I've been doing legal sales software for many, many years, basically from the infancy of the industry back before there was even a PC.
Wonderful. So Chuck, you have been in the industry for quite some time. We do this for data analytics and KPIs, but I want to go back a little bit to the old days, right? And tell us about how did you get involved with the legal industry and when was that?
Sure. The Wild Wild West, as we called it. So interestingly enough, I started my career as a hardware technician back in the days of mainframe computers. I used to drive around the cities fixing computers at automobile dealerships. And as part of that, I learned the software piece of it, how it all worked together, and that intrigued me. As most things, how they work in this industry, one of the people at that company started up his own company, and he decided to deal with law firms. And he recruited me to go work there. And at that time, I had no experience with law firms or anything in the legal industry. And so I used my ability that I learned from both how customers use software as well as how they implemented the hardware piece of it and all of that technology to benefit that company and to actually, automate different law firms.
That's awesome. And when was that again? What year was it?
That would have been in about 1980.
1980. Wow. And then at the time you had, what type of softwares and you were talking about and what was the system?
Yeah, so there was no such thing as matter management back then. Didn't exist. We were just moving into CPM-based systems that you could actually get machines to talk to each other without using a mainframe. And they were mostly word processing systems. We used WordStar at the time. And they were time and billing systems because that's what attorneys did. They billed for their time. And they generated a lot of documents. And that was the focus of what we did at that time.
That's wonderful. So can we say the origination of attorneys coming to computer was to track their time? And that was a tool for make it easy. And do you remember before computer, they were tracking their time on paper?
Yeah, they used to use paper, and they still, at that time, still used paper. In fact, attorneys didn't use computers. They didn't want to use computers. They had a support staff that took that timesheet and put it into the system and generated the bill. Mm-hmm. They also would dictate. Remember the old dictation machines? They would dictate. They would hand the tape off to somebody who would transcribe that into their terminals and generate their documents.
That's so cool. And then, so you went to law firm, and then you helped them with the technology and all that. What were the challenges? Like you coming from a computer background, you understand, but they had no idea what this computer is especially back in the
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand that email didn't even exist back then. There was no internet. There was very little utilization from a professional perspective to even use these machines. It started changing a little bit as younger attorneys came into the fold and they were using them a little bit. So some of them would put them on their desks, but very, very few. So it was still an old way of doing business where, the support staff did all of that work and I practiced law.
So then what happened then? What was the next movement in the technology and how you introduced it?
The IBM PC was delivered into the industry.
And when was that?
That, I don't remember. It was probably, 1980, around there sometime, which took over for the CPM machines. But it was very crude. It did nothing. I mean, the original didn't even have a disk drive in it. It had 2 floppies.
I have one of those.
Right? Yeah. So that really revolutionized what was to come.
And then it would become more accessible that they can have a computer on their desk.
Right.
And do you remember any law firm at the time, any name that they were pioneering using computer?
We were working with mostly smaller law firms, and there were several companies that started developing what we now call matter management, where an actual attorney had some value using the computer. They could see what was going on their case. They could put quick notes into the case right away. They could see what the financial aspect of the case was and so forth, what the settlements were, and do research on their own and see what other case law was out there. Back in the day, research-wise, there was usually one terminal that had a little disk in it that they would go to that machine to do all the research versus the way we do it today on our cell phones.
And there was no internet, so
there was no internet. You would hook it up with we would have a dial-up line and a modem that the machine would dial out to a service, and they would pull in information.
Sure. And when the internet was born, right? One of the things about trust, basically technology, attorneys, convincing them that technology can help. Can you tell us a story?
Yeah, sure. It's very interesting. So I worked for a company that was very forward thinking, that at the time there was no legal software that really utilized internet type code, browser-based applications, all of that kind of stuff. It was not something that the legal profession readily adopted. They were scared of it. They really didn't want to have anything to do with it. And we developed this product, and we were trying to sell this product and really taught the industry how this can help them. And it took a couple years before all of a sudden there was like a switch that hit to where they wouldn't even talk to us about the internet, to if you didn't have it, we weren't even going to talk to you. And that's how fast it actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Now, at the time you mentioned that you were selling softwares, right? So you got to go to these law firms and companies. First you started with law firms, right? And then you went to corporate. What was the storytelling? How would you tell the story, if you remember, that is compelling for you?
Yeah. So the legal profession is really about the adversary. It's an adversarial type scenario, right? You've got the plaintiff side and the defense side. And on the corporate side, on the corporate part, you're usually on the defense side. What we were doing on the law firm side was on the plaintiff side. So although the same, it was very different. The stories were very different, but it still was always about efficiency. It was about the ability to do more with less. It was about the ability to be more responsive and get better settlements and get better financial, intakes out of it. About obviously efficiency was the big thing back then, because we moved from having to have a group of people who did transcription and generate documents and produce bills to point of entry, where now attorneys are now starting to do that type of work. Automated letters were being generated where they didn't have to craft the letter, but they could use a template and merge data into those letters. And all these kinds of features were coming about that they could, handle 10 cases versus 2 cases in the same amount of time.
Interesting.
Now, the corporate side was more financially driven. It's processing bills because, on the corporate side, you're managing the case with outside counsel doing the heavy lifting. On the law firm side, you're doing the heavy lifting. So it's a little bit different. The needs were a little bit different, but very similar in nature. And the company I was working for back then really transitioned our law firm-based product into a corporate litigation product that we were very successful with.
Interesting. So one of the things that struck me is just like this is history that's happening. Now everybody is talking about AI and AI is transforming, but there are some fears of losing job. When that transformation happened back then from attorneys basically doing some of the work themselves, did you feel the fear in, let's say, the administration that says, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose?
There's always been that fear from day one. I have basically lived through multiple technology revolutions, if you think about it, in this industry, from prior to the PC, to the client server revolution, to the internet explosion, to now AI. Every piece along the way, it's always been, am I going to lose my job? I've never seen anybody lose their job because of this technology. Now, they may not have hired as many people for the future work, but the work has always been there. It's different work. They work differently. Many ways they work better, but I've never seen anybody get fired because they brought on a computer system.
What happened? Did they learn the new technology? They were forced?
They have to adopt. They have to adopt. They have to learn. They have to change the way work is done. Now, some of it happens organically. Sometimes it has to be forced.
Now, when these changes were happening in the industry and the internet came in, right? What happened to some of the vendor sites that they were providing services in the old-fashioned way?
They're no longer with us. You had to stay with the latest trends in technology, or you were not going to survive. One of the major competitors that we had at that time had probably a 70% market share in the industry. In corporate legal. It was corporate legal management. It was case management and financial management. Dominated the industry. Did not switch to a browser-based application and went out of business very shortly thereafter.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Do you know why the reason that they resisted?
They didn't believe in it like a lot of people didn't at the time. And we weren't sure about it at the time. Our founders were very forward-thinking and invested a lot of money to be able to generate this, saw the vision of where it was going and really put that company It exploded right after that.
So interesting. Now, when you moved to the internet era and web-based application, right, it was a different perspective because the client-server application, they had different dynamics, different response time. The web, some people, they didn't believe it. I remember at that time that I joined the industry. How was the dynamic at the time, clients resisting to move to the new technology?
So, just like you have forward-looking companies in the development space, you have forward-looking companies in general corporate America. Some were early adopters. Some saw it, believed it, and obviously they were, the people who drove that explosion. Many companies didn't believe in it. They didn't think it was going to work. They were kind of old-fashioned, if you will. This works for me now. Why would I risk it? Very risk averse. They too quickly changed. It's just like when we went from applications that were installed in-house and everybody had an IT department that managed all of that to, oh my God, I'm going to put this in the cloud as software as a service. The other revolution that took place, right? It took a while before that got adopted, but you look today, it's commonplace. I think one other thing happened that helped that whole thing take place, and that's the cell phone. Mm-hmm. People were able to go on their cell phone, find information instantly, communicate with people instantly, and started asking questions like, why can't I do that at the office? Mm-hmm. Why are my systems that I use every day not capable of doing the same thing as this small device that I hold in my hand and I use for all my personal stuff? Why can't I do that? Mm-hmm. And I think that drove a lot of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good example about the cloud. I remember many people, they had a huge resistance that put their data in the cloud.
Well, and some of that is the existing technology stack, and the folks that manage that stack drove that fear. Job security, of course. Now those people, obviously, there were many of them who may not have been working for that company anymore because they outsourced entire departments, right? But the professional people, the users, they always had work to do.
Sure. Now, at the time of the cloud, you also have continue to stay in the industry. Some people, they changed career. They went to the different industry.
Yeah.
What made you to stay? What was it?
I think part of it is the experience that I have in it, but it's still fun. It's still different. We're into the next revolution now. We're into the AI revolution now. What does it mean? Where's it going to go? I remember back in the day when we were doing the internet stuff, AI was still there. It was in its infancy. It was being talked about. We weren't quite sure what it was going to do. I don't know if we know what it's going to do yet, but it's fun. It's exciting. But it all gets down to one, no matter all the different technologies that I've seen, it gets down to one thing. We're problem solvers. We solve problems that people are having to hopefully make their lives better. And that to me is what it's all about.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's true. Now, the past maybe 5 to 10 years, there's movement of legal operations. Mm-hmm. Maybe unlike before, now we have more dynamic in the legal department, make it more modernized and business partner. And there's a lot of new bright minds and people from other industry coming to the legal industry, right? And that's something that that's why we're here, right? Now, what are the advices you have for people coming from outside of legal industry to legal industry?
So I think that legal ops has probably been one of the most positive changes in the entire corporate legal dynamics, if you will, because, historically, legal work, the GC, the attorneys, the corporate legal department has kind of been on an island by itself, not necessarily managed like a business, with, the hiring practices and all the different things that they would do. Yeah, they have a budget, and yeah, they're a cost center, and yeah, they add a lot of value to the organization, but they were kind of just left on their own. Nobody really understood it. And legal ops now has come in, and I think it's strengthened the business aspects of how legal departments function, how they purchase technology, how they hire, how they staff, there's just a whole different dynamic going on now. And you can see with like these organizations, Clock as an example, 5 years ago was nothing. They barely existed to where it is today. And I think it's a very positive thing.
Do you have any advice for, people joining the industry from other industries coming in to make a change?
Yeah, it's not that different from other industries. It's really not all that different. I think you need to run it as a business. I think you need to take the attorneys and the professionals. You really want them to utilize their expertise in managing the law and not so much the day-to-day monotonous, time-consuming functions that doesn't require a highly educated attorney to do. Case in point, one of the key functions that I see a lot today is, we hire an outside counsel to do our work for us. They do work, they produce a bill, they send that bill in, the bill gets marked up, audited with technology, and then it sits in an attorney's mailbox for them to go through line by line and make adjustments based on what the computer tells them to do. Can I ask why? There's no value. There's professionals who that's what they do. What I should get as an attorney is that bill fully adjudicated, ready to go for me to say, yep, that's the work they did. They did quality work. I need to rank them on the work they did. I need to look at the results that came out of the work that they did and plan and manage the proper way to handle this case based on the best needs of my company, not on ridiculous looking at 1.5 hours for a particular task that I'm not going to do anyway.
That's right. Yeah, wonderful. This is one of the things that normally I ask myself sometimes, how to explain your job to a 6 years old.
It's very hard for me. Okay. So today my profession, and I've held multiple jobs in this industry. So I've owned my own business. I've delivered products and services in the legal space to law firms. I've developed code. I've sold. I've implemented systems along the way. I've trained people on how to use systems. Today I'm what's called a sales engineer. So my job is to work with the sales staff to find a solution based on what our products can do and how I can deliver the best suited solution to that particular client. And so if I tell a 6-year-old I'm a sales engineer, first of all, there's really, if you look it up in the dictionary, you really don't find a definition. Nobody knows what a sales engineer is. Right? It's this kind of in-between technical person and salesperson. So it's very difficult. Yeah. But the main thing I tell them is that, I work with clients to solve their problems. That's really what I do for a living.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Any final comment, a story to share, anything that personal or work related?
God, I have tons of them. I mean, I can tell you it has been quite a ride going through the technology revolutions that I've seen. I just wonder where it's going to go. I'm totally excited about how we can utilize AI. We're doing it today in limited fashion. Yes, I can do chat GPT and, those kinds of things. But how wonderful is it going to be when I can just say, computer, tell me what I want to know, and list out what it is, and it just shows up on my screen. I don't have to push buttons to navigate the user interface. All these just cool things that we're going to be putting into the software along the way to make it more adaptable, easier to use, more friendly, is going to be extraordinary.
Wonderful. Chuck, it's always a pleasure. We know each other for
Yes,
25
it's
years.
been quite a ride.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you.